What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I'm going to be showing you how to build this, an awesome $750 gaming PC build that smashes through all the latest titles at 1080p and beyond. Let's do this. The Gigabyte Aero 16 OLED combines performance, a sleek design, and a stunning 4K OLED panel to create the ultimate high-end on-the-go laptop solution. With DDR5 memory, a Gen 4 SSD, RTX 40 series graphics, and even an i9 in this model, the Aero 16 has you covered. A sleek design with slim bezels, top-tier portability, and awesome aesthetics rounds off a great package. Learn more about the Gigabyte Aero 16 OLED at the first link in the description below. In order to get an accurate idea of pricing, I'm going to use Newegg to pick all the parts for this build, then order the bits I don't already have before assembling the system step by step. Now it's interesting because Newegg have their entry-level build at below 1.2k. We're going to try and do this build for just $750. Now I'm going to start with the CPU. Couple of options to choose from. Probably got something like the 12400F from Intel's last generation, so that's going to come in at $149 with a further $15 off, taking us down to $135. But of course we can also consider something like the Ryzen 5600 or 5600X. And you can see the 5600 comes in at just $129. I'm going to hazard a guess this is probably the slightly better option versus the Intel i5 choice. Let's go ahead and add that 6-core, 12-thread chip straight to the cart. Now, as far as motherboards go, we of course want something B550. That's the more budget-oriented chipset for Ryzen 5000 processors. So let's go on to Newegg, search B550, and then actually sort by the best-selling options. Couple of options straight away. This Pro board looks quite nice, but I fear that the white colour scheme just isn't really what we're going for in this build. This ASRock board looks a bit more like it though, and at $99 is broadly within the kind of money that I wanted to spend. It has got USB-C, and that's the thing I was going to look out for. I want to make sure that we've got USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C and also Type-A in this instance, so that of course you can get that next-gen connectivity. So let's add that to the cart, nice and easy. As far as memory or RAM is concerned, normally I'd go for 32 gigs if the build costed $1,000 or more. But I think because of the tight budget that we're on here, I think 32 gig kit is just too expensive. So let's see what the best-selling 16 gigabyte options are available on Newegg. Straight away, Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro, one of the best-selling kits at 84. 54 here for a 3200 megahertz kit. Ideally, we want 3600 megahertz for Ryzen though, so let's bear that in mind. There is a Corsair Vengeance kit here, which is 3600 megahertz, DDR4 for just 57, and that's going to give us 16 gigs. As I say, ideally 32 gigs would be preferable, but I think 16 for the kind of 1080p gaming PC we're building will be totally fine. Plus, you can always upgrade later. That gives us then the motherboard, RAM, and CPU, and puts us at just under $300. So we've used between a third and half of the budget so far. We're not doing too badly. I'm also at this stage going to find ourselves a storage solution. I am of the opinion that you should always opt for a Gen 4 NVMe, given just how much cheaper they've got nowadays, and that's going to give your system the illusion of speed. No one wants to wait ages for their PC to actually boot up, or in fact for things to download. Internet speeds nowadays are so quick, we want to make sure we've got a good drive. We want a Gen 4 option, so we're going to pick PCI Express 4X4 and hit apply, and we also want to go for a drive that's got a maximum price, I would say, of up to about $75 US. Any more than this and we're probably wasting money. WD Black SN770 at $74, not too bad. MSI Spatium M450 is better at $57, but I've noticed here this crucial P3 Plus, which has better speeds than the Spatium drive, and at just $54 is exactly what we're after. It is back ordered, so hopefully it'll come back in stock, or of course you can check out up-to-date pricing for other retailers like Amazon in the description below. This video isn't sponsored by Newegg, I'm just using their prices to get a realistic $750 build put together. That then leaves us with around about $400 for the rest of the components. So that's a CPU cooler if we decide to buy one. We can use the stock cooler that comes included. That also means we need a case, PSU, and GPU. Now, as far as power supply goes, I think we need a 650 watt unit for this build. I'm going to hazard a guess that the graphics card will be able to fit in this budget isn't going to go much beyond needing a 650 watt power supply. And straight away, this Thermaltake Smart BM3 is a superb option. It's got PCI Gen 5, it's got an 80+ bronze certification for good efficiency, and is available in other variants. The 750 watt is only $10 more, the 850 watt is only $20 $20 more, and you can even get a 500 watt version for $40 if you want. I think we should go for the 80 plus bronze version though at $70. Never want to cheap out too much on a power supply. Go for a reputable brand is really important. Now then, we've got $412 so far spent. That gives us about $330 left to spend. I'm going to allocate about $50 to the case, but we'll pick that at the end because that's a much more subjective choice, leaving us with about $270 for the GPU. I always leave the GPU right to the end so we know exactly how much money we have to spend. So what graphics card can you get for sub $300? You of course could get something like an RTX 4060 for $299, though that isn't necessarily the best buy at this price point. Let's just have a look at how much they are going for on Newegg though, in sort of fairness to Nvidia, I suppose. RTX 4060, lowest price, $299. We're going to struggle to fit that in the budget, to be honest with you, and that's for a single fan card that's probably not going to do us really any favors. On the AMD side, you've got something like the 6700, which is a great card, but I also fear that's going to be out the budget. Yeah, you're looking here at $300 or so for the 6700 XT variants. A little bit too expensive really for what we want. Potentially though, the newer 7600 might be a better shout. Not the CPU, the GPU. Let's add RX to the start of that and see where we land. We'll sort by price lowest to high. Now, the 7600 has a couple of caveats. You only get 8 gigabytes of VRAM, whereas on the 6700 XT, you get 12, which is much better for 1440p gaming. But a card like this Gigabyte one of the cheapest options available, with 3 fans, we've actually reviewed this card and been pretty impressed with it, really, is a great shout. If it's only 1080p and which you're looking to game, this is a superb option. It's just a little bit VRAM constrained when you try and play at those high resolutions. To be honest with you, I think that's going to be the best shout. And even the second-hand market's probably not going to yield us much better for $270. So let's pop that in the cart as well and view our system so far. So $680, that leaves us with about $70 left for the case choice. And this is where things get a bit complicated. I'd like to avoid a budget no-name case through a brand that I've never heard of and never tested because they're not very nice to build in and they just create problems. There are some great recommendations I can give though. The Montech Air has always been a great choice, but the new Montech Air 903 Max is phenomenal. The only problem with that case is that it's quite large, and although it's awesome value, our small micro ATX motherboard is going to look a bit out of place. Deepcool and Fantex are other good brands to consider at this price point. You've got the G300A Ultra from Fantex for just $69 plus $5 off, while Deepcool's CC560, based on their 560 chassis lineup, is another solid option. The Q300L is also a great bare bones option. I hate it when they say see price in cart. Let's add it to the cart, see how much it's going to cost. How much is that going to cost? Show me the price. At just $39, but I'm going to use this Kolinik chassis. It's a mesh case that looks like most budget mesh cases on the market. It's available here in the UK for a great price, and I'll link best global availability for this and all the other options down in the description below. The build though I think looks great. We've got a B550 motherboard with USB-C and USB 3.2 bandwidth, the 7600 GPU, which is one of the best for that $250 price point, give or take, with a 650 watt power supply that's actually ATX3 and PCI Gen 5 for just $70, with a 1TB SSD, 16 gigs of DDR4 memory, and a Ryzen 5 5600. For $750, that looks amazing. So let me order all these parts, and I'll be right back with you once they've arrived. So a few days have passed, and all the bits I was missing have arrived. And I feel like I said this in every build, pretty good part selections all in all. It feels weird to go back to a B550 motherboard choice in the present day when B650 boards have kind of become the norm, but it's such a great value proposition. AMD really are killing it with how long they're continuing some of their older CPUs for. So that's enough chatting. James, we want to see a PC build, so let's start building. Oh no. A computer, Ryzen 5 5600X to start off with, into the B550M motherboard. Oh man. Inside of the motherboard box, you'll find yourself the built-in rear I/O shield. Also get the motherboard manual and a driver CD. We definitely won't be needing that. Otherwise though, the most important thing that you get in the box is the actual motherboard itself. Here we go. The super budget, super great value ASRock B550M Pro 4. Then it's a case of installing our Ryzen 5 5600 processor. 6 cores and 12 threads of budget gaming goodness make it an awesome selection for this build. With these older AMD sockets, it's just a case of pulling up the arm, dropping the CPU in, but be careful, the pins on the CPU are pretty delicate. The arm goes down really easily, and then I'm also just going to add on the stock cooler. You'll need to remove the built-in plastic brackets for this before popping the cooler down onto the included backplate. In an ideal world, I would have picked up something like the Deepcool AK400 or Be Quiet Pure Rock range, but we're on a budget, and this is going to be fine, as long as we don't want to do any overclocking or anything particularly fancy. The RAM's next up. This Vengeance DDR4 kit's nice and easy to pop in. Just going to add it into the 2nd and 4th slots, a little something like this. Apply even pressure, that'll click into place, lovely jubbly, and repeat for as many DIMMs as you've got. Of course, you can upgrade to 32 gigs later by buying an identical kit and fill in the spare slots. 32 gigs is a little overkill, I think, for this build, as alluded to earlier, but is helpful, especially for slightly higher resolution gaming in AAA titles in particular. Then, the motherboard, I was going to say is finished, but that would be a lie. We need to do the M.2 NVMe drive, and that is where this comes in. This is the crucial P3 Plus. Read and write speed's about 5 gigabytes a second. Really, really good, and it's going to make sure this system feels incredibly snappy. This motherboard also has a built-in M.2 heat shield, so that's going to help diffuse the heat from the M.2 SSD, and of course keep a lid on those drive temperatures. So let's just unscrew both of those. They're very small screws, so just be careful not to lose them. This is where a magnetic screwdriver can be particularly handy. Then pop the drive in, sort of at a 45-degree angle to begin with. Get it in there and then push it down before finally adding the M.2 Armor heatsink back on top. A little something like this. There we are. Get it lined up. Use your small, teeny tiny screwdriver once again just to fasten these screws into place. Get the first one going just a little bit before adding the second one in, and then tighten both of them up to finish things off. That is where this Kolinik case comes in from earlier. It's called the Observatory, but basically what you want is any mesh case that's ATX with a mesh panel at the front, as the name sort of suggests. And if we remove the mesh panel, there you go, we've got 3 120mm ARGB fans. That's going to give us loads of airflow through the chassis. There's another 120mm at the rear. Feels pretty nice, actually. Got like a magnetic dust filter situation, and then on the side panel, magnets closed, and when you swing the glass around, can just be lifted off its hinges nice and easily. I am going to lay the case down flat for the next stage of the build, which is installing the motherboard, because that's going to make it just that little bit easier. Just be careful as well to tuck away all these cables, which are slightly tangled, to be honest with you, in the back of the chassis. I've just realised you also get 2 120mm RGB fans at the top. You get 6 included ARGB fans. Wow, that's more than expensive cases. Fair play. I'll link this down at Overclockers UK in the description below. Kolinik, I like what I see. One thing I don't like quite so much is that you actually do have to install the IO shield with this motherboard, but it's saving us a load of money, so frankly I don't care. Just slide it into the rear cutout of the case. Your audio port should be at the bottom. Then clip it in all 4 corners. Watch your fingers, it can be a bit sharp. Then the motherboard itself just slides on top. Do this really carefully, get it all lined up. I've just realised we do need to move a couple of standoffs as well. I was a bit hasty there. If you look at the case, you'll see we've got 2 standoffs at the top and 2 down the middle, as well as 2 at the bottom. We're going to move the 2 at the bottom to more appropriate locations for our M-ATX board. Screw it in corner by corner, do everything nice and loose, and tighten each one up as you go. It really is pretty simple. And with that, the motherboard is in. That's looking pretty good. It is an M-ATX board in an ATX case, but it's a much smaller ATX case than lots of other options. So personally, I think it looks fine. What we are going to do, though, is pop the GPU in next. Now, we're going to need to remove the top 2 PCI slots. Now, unfortunately, these PCI lanes are the cheap snap-on types. You basically have to give them a bit of a wiggle, snap them out. It's not my preferred way of doing things, and I do think for the sake of an extra few dollars or pounds, these should be changed out for a better removable solution. But as long as you don't take the wrong ones out, you'll be fine. GPU-wise, RX 7600, amazing choice. Yes, the 6700, 6750 XT are also fantastic options, but they will cost you more and are harder to get your hands on. This is very readily available, and the fact that this Gigabyte card was like the 2nd or 3rd cheapest 7600 on the whole of Newegg with a 3-fan Windforce style cooler is amazing. Why did I pick the 7600? Well, let's take a look at some of the gaming benchmark numbers you'll be able to achieve on this card first of all. In Call of Duty's Warzone 3, for example, at 1080p high with FSR enabled and set to quality, you'll be able to pull in around 124 FPS on average. This is a really competitive frame rate that should allow you to perform well and also keep the game running super smooth. Call of Duty's Modern Warfare 3 was a very, very similar story, which is not particularly surprising. 1080p high, FSR again on quality, you'll be able to pull in around 126 FPS on average, just 2 frames per second of differential here. While moving through into even a game like Starfield, much harder to run, more difficult when it comes to driver optimizations, still yields over 100 FPS and quite comfortably so at 1080p high settings. First-person shooter, competitive esports titles are also more than capable for a card and build like this. Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings achieved just shy of 250 FPS. Wow! While Apex Legends at 1080p 1080p high, also achieve very good frame rates, 155 FPS on average. I could go on, and you can learn more about all the performance from not only this build, but also the 7600, linked in the card section now and description box down below. So with performance in the bag, the only thing left to do is actually install the GPU into the build. Now, I'm going to push back the clip on the top slot of our ASRock motherboard. Lovely stuff. Then slide the GPU in. Yeah, a bit of pressure. Lovely stuff. That looks really, really quite good. A couple of screws are going to secure it down. Then the rear door is going to close just to tidy things up a little bit. And of course, all that's left to do afterwards is get it all wired up with power from the power supply. The final piece of the puzzle is this Thermaltake Smart BM3. Now, I did recommend in the earlier portion of this video the 650 watt unit. This is the 750 watt unit, but I already had the 750. So I thought spending money on the 650 was kind of pointless. But obviously, if you're doing this build from scratch, the only difference between this and the 650 is the wattage. Efficiency is the same, power connections are the same. Both are ATX3 PCI 5 with Japanese main capacitors as well for good measure. Now, opening this power supply up, we don't actually need the Gen 5 cable, but as mentioned earlier, it's just quite nice to have. PSU is of course there. Just need to find ourselves, by the looks of things, a GPU and a SATA power connection. So GPU looks a little something like this with dual 6+2 pin harnesses. So that's going to pop into the power supply. Then of course we need to get ourselves a SATA cable for the built-in RGB hub. That's this thing right here. Pop that into the bottom as well. Then it's a case of spinning the chassis round and installing the PSU at the back. Slide that in and 4 screws to secure it in. Motherboard cable goes to the far right hand side. It's the largest of the bunch, while the CPU power cable goes to the top left and the GPU cable to the GPU. Nice and simple. And then, in theory, the system should boot up. Now, I haven't done the front panel cables yet, so I'm going to use my handy screwdriver to actually jump start the PC. Ah, it's on, it lives, it lives. I was jumping the wrong pins, different on different motherboards. Wow, that looks amazing. GPU, all the RGB fans, the DRAM is on. You know what? $750, and that is what you get. You saw the performance earlier. I think as a package, it looks phenomenal. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Check out all the parts linked in the description below. $750? Who'd have thought it?